The way I would try to explain Asia, or what Asia is in terms of two metaphors. One is the push me pull you from Dr. Dolittle, a children's story, and the other is the game of chess, or a perspective on the game of chess. The push me pull you isn't really something that we can imagine properly. It's rather something that's very difficult to imagine. And that's because, for example, Asia isn't a single geographic unit. Rather, if we go back just over 100 years, Asia extended from the Ottoman Empire all the way through to Japan. And even in our times, if we take the example of North Korea and Singapore, the contrast is so stark, and it's very difficult for us to work out what the unities and the commonalities are. And so the push me pull you is really this idea that on the surface, for all the different, the huge numbers of people we're talking about, we've got these very different systems, and yet on the surface there's a tremendous amount of peace actually in our times. And underneath that is this very, very competitive jostling for attention, competition for resources, which makes it a very difficult place or region to identify, to analyze and to study. And yet for all that we have a lot of people with a tremendous knowledge of the languages of the region who are making efforts to do that. And yet that brings us to the second metaphor, the idea of the game of chess, where we're not looking at it in terms of contestants, where we understand the rules of the game and we can get a clear idea of the board, but we're rather looking at it as if we are at the level of the board itself. And our perspective from a corner of the board only gives us access to seeing a couple of the squares. And they're not even squares anymore, they're more like a rhombus. And so when we're looking at the pieces in movement, it's very difficult to determine how they're moving or what the rules are for their movement. And it's very hard to determine whether a pawn, for example, has more power than a queen or vice versa. And so all of this makes the idea of Asia, of what Asia is, tremendously interesting, but tremendously complex at the same time.